Hello, welcome to today's presentation on resumes and cover letters. Let's take a look at today's agenda. We are going to cover a little bit about cover letters and what those are and what they should consist of. And then, of course, we're going to cover the resume and really taking a look a little deeper at what the resume is. And we're also going to touch on some tools that you can utilize in this process of updating your resume. I'll leave you with some action items and, of course, leave some time at the end for some Q&A. So I wanted to throw in this quick little, data point in here in terms of, the importance of cover letters. So a question that we get often from our students is whether or not they should submit a cover letter. And, as a career services professional and kind of working with the employers here in the engineering school, oftentimes we do hear mixed messages, and you'll hear mixed messages. Really, a lot of this is very subjective, but more often than not, we hear from our employers that they do look at cover letters. Now, some of them may not, but some of them actually use it as a filtering tool. So I actually did recently read an article that stated that an employer would not look at applicant's application materials if they did not include a cover letter. Why do you all think that is? Why is a cover letter so important? Anyone?
So it can make you stand out from the applicants?
It can make you stand out for the applicants. Yes, absolutely. And so what that cover letter really does, and we'll get into it a little bit more, it is a way for you to tell your story. So your resume is going to be very fact, right? It's just a lot of things that you did. And of course, you'll list accomplishments in there. But the cover letter can really be the voice to your application. It can really tell the story of you and why you are applying for that particular company, why you are passionate about your field. That's what our employers want to see. And quite frankly, in my own experience, actually, I'm going through some applications myself right now. And I actually did have an applicant who did not submit a cover letter. And when I looked at their resume, I didn't see a connection. I didn't see a connection with what the experience and skills that our office is looking for and what was included in their resume. So it would have been helpful for me to see in the cover letter, well, why is this individual applying then? I didn't get that. And because of that, I didn't move them on to the interview process. So just know that cover letters are an important tool that you can use to kind of push, forward, your application through the process. So let's talk a little bit about what your cover letter should include. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you are also, and you might have heard this already about resumes. We often talk about it in our office, and if you've ever come to our office for advising, or if you do plan to come in, we're going to talk about the relevance of your documents, whether that's your resume and cover letter, and the other key term that we use is tailoring, those documents to particular employers. So you really should not be submitting generic resumes and cover letters to employers. And you're probably thinking to yourself, so you're saying that I need to do 50 or 100 different ones for the different applications? The answer to that is yes. That doesn't mean you have to do 50 or 100 whole brand new ones. It just means that you may have more of a skeleton resume or skeleton cover letter, as I call it, or master resume, master cover letter, that then you can edit and create different versions of these documents. And so the cover letter, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're looking at the job description, so then you can pull in some key things to that cover letter based on what that particular employer is looking for. So always keep that in mind. And this goes the same with both documents, and I'll talk about the resume in a bit. So you really want to go through and think about, what can you do for the employer? right? What are the skills that you bring to the table? And don't just think about your technical skills, that, you know, the engineering side of things, which of course you're an engineer and you're going to have to showcase that. But it's really also important to include your soft skills in there. So what are these soft skills? Things like leadership, communication, your ability to work in teams. All these things are very important. Why? Because they can find 100 applicants that are the electrical engineering major, but what is going to make one candidate stand out from the other? And oftentimes it is these soft skills. You also want to make sure that you are thinking beyond a task that you did. You want to look at your accomplishments. What are those things that really made a difference, with a particular project you were working on, an internship that you were a part of? What impact did you make? Maybe it was that you were part of a club. And I recently had heard that one of our clubs, I think it was one of the rocket clubs that, shot a handmade rocket, into space, and, what an accomplishment, right? Or maybe it was that you went to a conference and you presented, to, all of the attendees, on a particular topic that you're an expert in. It's an accomplishment to be selected as a presenter in a conference, right? So really going beyond did, right? A list of things you did and taking it beyond that. So a little bit more in detail as to what the cover letter should include. And also note, and I'll show you this at the end, is we have sample resumes and cover letters on our website, and I'll show you where that's at. So that way you have kind of an idea what it includes. Before I kind of get into the details of this, it really should be no more than a one-page document. As a person who reviews resumes and cover letters often, it is dizzying when I receive so much information. So you have to try to make it easy for the eyes of the person that is looking at it. And you also have to think about, it may not go to a person first. It may go to a machine, right? A lot of our employers, you may have already heard, use these AI tools to help them filter through all the thousands of candidates that they get. And they're pulling out keywords from those, documents. So that's why the tailoring comes into place again and why it's so important. So in terms of the anatomy of the cover letter, no more than one page. Typically, you'll see the cover letters are about 3 to 4 paragraphs, perhaps. The first paragraph is typically an introduction of yourself, of who you are, like your major, the school, the university that you go to, what degree you are going for, and perhaps a really quick sentence on, what position you're applying to and why you're a good fit in one sentence, which is really hard, right? 1 or max 2 sentences of why. And it could be a really quick summary of like, I have 1, 2, 3. You could touch on a tech skill, a soft skill, your passion for whatever it is that you're applying to. And then the first paragraph gets into the meat of like your application here, your voice. Again, this is your opportunity. Please do not regurgitate what's on your resume. That's not what the cover letter is about. Again, this is meant to give a voice to your application. And believe it or not, I've gotten cover letters that I'm like, wow, like I really am excited to meet this candidate. And some others I'm like, like, because they fall flat. Like they, especially when you look at so many, they fall flat when the student doesn't you have to add a little heart to it. I know it's a little odd, right? It seems very technical, but at the end of the day, they're also hiring a person, and they need to kind of see that. And this is the first place that they can do that. And so it could be a lot of times what I see from the students and is talking about a particular industry or a particular project that they did that they were so proud of. And you'd be surprised at the way that they write it or wrote it is impactful. And I remember those things. Second paragraph is really what you want to hit on. Now, it doesn't mean you can't put something that you added in the resume into your cover letter. Sure, you can. But you're not, what I usually, again, these things are very subjective. I'm like, when I see bullets in the cover letter, I'm like, is this going to start to look again like the resume? And that's when it kind of like turns me off, because I'm like, okay, this is starting to look like a resume again. And so some cases you can do it where it is beneficial, but just don't make it look exactly like the resume. Because if I wanted to see a resume, I can go look at your resume. So the meat of your cover letter should really, again, be tailored to the particular job. So what is that project that you worked on that you think that employer will really be interested in? Or maybe it was that leadership opportunity that you had at a student organization. Maybe you were the treasurer, and it doesn't necessarily have to all be related. It doesn't all have to be within engineering even. Now, of course, you want to make sure that there's a connection there, that there is an example of engineering in there, but maybe it was, impact that you had in your organization. Maybe you were part of Society of Women Engineers and you were in charge of increasing membership, and you were able to increase membership by 10% by putting together a marketing campaign. And you were really proud of that because you felt that made an impact to that particular organization. So thinking about things outside of engineering is also going to assist there. And then finally, kind of a closing, paragraph here. Again, the first paragraph is meant to give a quick introduction of you and why you're a good candidate, right? With that quick sentence like that you're going to put together or two. And then the final one reminds them again, right, why you're a good candidate. And then here is often where I will see, usually it's at the end of the second paragraph or in the closing, that I see why it is that they're interested. Don't forget to add, I want to work for X company because why? Employers want to know that. Employers want to know that you care about working for them, that it's not just, I need a job, I need an internship. They can really smell that, they can gauge that from our students when it is very disingenuous. So the more, and you might have to dig deep as to why you want to apply for a particular job, because at the end of the day, it might be that you need a job, right? You want to get a job after you graduate. You want to get an internship, but dig deep about why you're applying for that particular employer, so that when you do write these things, when you talk to them at an interview, it could come, that little piece that you're holding on to about why you want to work for them is apparent to them. So I spoke about this a little bit earlier, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but just again, a reminder of the impact of cover letters and why they're so important in your application. So if you're teetering on whether or not you want to include one, I say err on the side of caution and include one. So now I want to kind of jump into the difference between a cover letter or a resume. I already kind of alluded to this a little bit also as well. Mentioned earlier that it's really the voice of your application, and it's a way for you to make a personal connection with a employer, whereas your resume is really more about getting to the point in terms of some of the experiences that you've had, whether they be within engineering or external to engineering. And just as a reminder, this is being recorded, so don't worry if you miss any of this. It will be available online on Viterbi Career Gateway. It probably already is some of the previous semesters. So before I jump into the resume, I know I said I was going to take some time at the end for any questions, but I'll take maybe just a couple of them before we move into a different area on cover letters. Any questions? I already see one here in person, and then I'll teeter to chat. So feel free to add something in the chat if you'd like.
Should we customize cover letter for each company we're applying for?
So anyone else hear my response to that earlier? What is the answer to that?
Yes.
So I mentioned to you, right, that yes, that is the recommendation. And that doesn't mean you have to, start from scratch. Have a master cover letter, have a master resume, and then that's the one that you're going to start. It's your base, right? So you may have it be very general, at first. And then when you look at the job description, that's when you're going to pull in these key things, because an employer, may be in the same industry, but they may want different things. And you might have experience in a lot of different things. So the point is not to bombard them with everything. I know some of this is so important to you all. I know when I meet with you, you're like, but I need to include that. It was a lot of work. And I'm like, I know, but is it really relevant? So be true to yourself, because you don't have a lot of space, right, in a cover letter or a resume. So you have to try to make an impact, and you have to also try to make them read your document. And again, from a person that looks at these often, if you're just trying to make it as easy as possible for them to actually move you through the process. And you can do that most efficiently by giving them the most relevant information. Because really, I scan the documents. I don't really dig deep into them unless I really like the candidate. First, I kind of go through them really quick. Well, actually, this is a question for you guys. How long do you think it takes? Well, not for cover letters, but for resume. How long do you think it takes for them to scan your resume?
30 seconds.
That was the case years ago. And now I've more and more been hearing it's more like 15 seconds, right? You're like, I'm putting all this work and effort into it, and they're only giving it 15 seconds. And that literally is probably around the time I take. Even when students come into resume review, I'm like really quickly scanning it. I'm pulling out like, does this apply to me? And if it doesn't, I'm like, okay, move on. And then if it does, then that's when I read a little bit deeper. And that's why it's so important to really create these different cover letters so that you are making it easier for them. Just remember, you're making it easier for them. Any other questions on the cover letter before I move into resumes? All right.
It should be only one page, right?
Ideally, yes. Again, because they are pressed for time, it is hard kind of to go through more than one page in a resume or a cover letter. Now, I will say I've been hearing mixed messages more about the resume now. It is still ideal for the one-page resume. But sometimes students come in and say, well, so-and-so employer said that 2 pages was fine. And if you're comfortable with that, go for it. And if it's been working for you, go for it. We are giving you the information based off of our conversations with the employers that are hiring our engineering students. That's where the information comes from. It's not Lilian is saying, I'm saying it, I'm the voice, but it really is because I'm hearing all these other voices. Did you have another follow-up question?
I have one more question regarding resume actually.
Okay, then we're going to get into resume right now. Okay, someone asked about how long the cover letter should be. I addressed that, ideally less than 1 page. And I have one more in person.
Yeah, so when I have multiple cover letters, should I be sorting them based on the industry of the company target, or how different should each of these?
That's a great question. So the question was, if you have multiple cover letters, can you sort it by industry? Yeah, absolutely, because then that'll make it easier for you when you're applying, right?
How should you have, what are the different kinds of cover letters you're supposed to have?
So it really depends on what you're applying for. Every student's going to be different, right? Because I've had students that are computer science business admin. So they have a resume and cover letter that is only CS related. So they'll have a lot more of their technical projects in there. And then they're applying also for more business type, maybe finance type stuff. And so then they'll have like different kind of, information in those documents. So there is no number. I can't tell you this is what exactly you have to have. It just depends on what you're applying to. I do like the idea though of breaking it up into industry, so it might not feel so overwhelming to you. If you have that, and then still looking at it to see for some keywords that the employer is asking about. So that way you're still kind of honoring that fact that, this employer still might be slightly different, because that happens. Even if it's the same industry, they might have still different needs, right? Anyone online have any questions before I move on? All right, I don't see anything in there. Oh, 1 second. Should we use a basic template for cover letters and resumes? So we have plenty of templates available online on our website, which I said I will show you, and I'll drop the URL in the chat for those of you online that you can start with, but there is no one right way. You'll see that we have several resume examples and one cover letter. Those are pretty, usually basic, but It's ultimately ends up being your, document, right? You're going to make it special to you. But we do put in some in there that have key things that are important. And I could point those out a little later. All right, so time for one more question, and someone in the audience here has a question.
Yeah, you said in a cover letter, we can include something not very related to the position, right? But in a resume, would you recommend us to add something like the additional information or like the leadership experience like that?
So the first part you said that I said not to include?
Not include.
To include relevant information, yes, in the cover letter. So then your question is in the resume, if you should include more information.
I mean,
Or-
in the cover letter, you can include something that is not very related to the position. It's about yourself, right? How you connect with this position in that company.
Yes.
But in a resume, would you recommend that?
Well, how would you do that? Like, you can, what? I mean, technically you're showing them by example in your resume. Technically, like if you're doing a lot of, work in the community, under volunteer work, you can state, yeah, you are helping in the K through 12, school system to teach students about STEM. You can say that you're volunteering at another organization to tutor underprivileged kids. So this to them is showing that you care about that without explicitly saying it in words like you would in the cover letter. So there is a way to do that with examples, but it's not explicitly saying, I really am passionate about this. In the resume, you don't want to speak in I's. It's more like in third person, or kind of what it says here, right? First person versus non-first person. All right, I'm going to move on so that we have some time, but again, I'll still leave some time for questions at the end. So getting into the resume now. So again, mentioning that it's a one-page summary of your experiences and skills, must include information. Please do include in your contact information. I recently started to see this, which I thought was a little odd, but I guess we're changing with the times. Some students weren't even including a phone number, which I thought was a little odd because I'm like, well, I kind of need to contact you. Now you're making it hard for me to try to dig that up somewhere. I would still say include a phone number. Address, I don't see that as often anymore. Eventually, when you get hired, you can put an address there. So, but definitely include obviously your email, your phone number. A lot of students will include their LinkedIn information, or if you have like GitHub sites or other things, web pages that, you can really highlight to an employer. Typically, they probably won't look at that immediately. Once you start moving in the process though, I click on those once they're a candidate that has moved on. The skills. So these are typically technical skills, especially for our like more CS and EE students, but our other skills, our other students also have, lab skills, are all sorts of like technical type of skills. Some students will also add in languages in here, not just tech languages, but spoken languages. I have also seen or have questions where students ask, well, what if it's something that I'm just learning and I'm not too, good at it yet, but the employer wants to see this. How do I put that in my resume? So often I'll see students write, like instead of splitting it up into, and it's easier when I show you the example, but like some students will split it up into different categories. Like I'll see tools, software, things like that. But other students I've seen split it up into the different categories of beginner, like just say 1 year of experience, and then, mid-level, like, 2 to 3 years, and then advanced 3 to 5 years. So that it really indicates to the employer, okay, he's a beginner in this, or he or she's a beginner in this. And that way they really know. But again, there's different ways to do it. Just depends on your situation, because you may not need to, cover that. Experiences can really be across the board for a lot of our students. You guys are all doing different things, which are really cool. Research opportunities, class projects. So a common question that I get from students is, I was a X major and now I'm a Y major. What can I include in my resume? I don't have much under my belt yet. I'm a first-year student. Well, think about your previous experiences, and maybe you could pull out what's the most relevant information for you moving forward. That may not be a lot, but try to really think about, our employers often look for like analytical skills, right? All engineering, students have that. Problem solving, critical thinking, right? So these are things that you could still probably pull from your previous engineering degree, or maybe if it wasn't in engineering and it was something different, we have a variety of students that come through and have different experiences. So it's about how you position yourself, what you pull out, the information that you pull out to be able to include it in this experiences section. And don't forget about your class projects that you can add in here. But then also don't forget, because sometimes I get students to say, I have nothing. And I'm like, well, let's talk a little bit more. I'm like, oh, that's not nothing. You have that and that. So an example is many of our students will do self-initiated projects. So, and that is really cool in my opinion, because it's not a project you're doing for class. It's not a project you're doing for a student org. You just really love to learn about whatever it was that you did that project with. Some students do it by themselves. Some students do it with a group of friends. I had one student do it with her dad, like another one, so there's a lot of ways that you can showcase your skills. And then also thinking about this gap in experience. You need to be looking already, if you haven't, at the job description so that you can already see, okay, this is what the employers that I'm looking at are looking for in terms of skills and experience. I have these, but I don't have these. What am I going to do about it? So in some cases, it could be addressed with a class. In other cases, maybe it's a certification, maybe it's joining a student organization, so that you can really enhance those out of class experiences. So I actually did have an employer tell me, and this is years ago, and I still tell this quote to the day because it's so important. They told me that they want to see from students how they apply what they learn in the classroom outside of the classroom. So especially like if you are in, say, EE, all of your EE classmates are going to have very similar coursework, right? So on paper, if you add that class project, while it's great to add it, you're going to look similar. So how else are you going to stand out? And oftentimes it's these extracurricular experiences outside of the classroom. So again, experiences ranges for our students in many different ways. The projects, again, can also include self-initiated projects, class projects. Some students will have a section that's just called relevant projects. And then they have a project that they did for class. They have a self-initiated project, and then they have a project that they did as part of an internship. It really depends on what you have and how it makes sense to add into your resume. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you highlight skills. When we say skills here, we're referring to these soft skills too. Which I already spoke about, right? The leadership, communication, teamwork, those are often cited by our employers as also very key, when they are hiring. Action verbs. So when you're starting off your bullet points, please do use bullet points in the resume. I pointed that out, but please, again, when someone is scanning through the resume, right? Like we talked about in about 15 seconds, it's just much easier to really kind of go through the information in a bullet format. When I see paragraphs, you just kind of like, and then when you're looking at so many, your brain is fried. So the bullets is just going to be easier for them. The action verbs refer to like that statement starting word, right? So led, created, managed, instead of I did this, it's just using those strong action verbs. It keeps it short and concise. And, I would strongly recommend that. And then, of course, this is the thing that students forget the most. So when you're looking at your statements, let me look and see if I'm not already talking about it. No. When you're looking at your statements that you're going to include under your experiences or projects, there's 3 things that you want to include in here. I should probably include this as a slide next time. The first one is you start with an action verb. The second piece of the statement tells the reader what they did or what you did. And then the third and final, which I almost all the time see students forget, is the last point here, which says include purpose or results. Employers are results driven. So whenever possible, if you can quantify information. So just as an example, you can state that you had an internship and you were in charge of updating the website. Okay, so that tells them a little bit, but taking that beyond, updated the website to increase customer traffic, which led to an increase in sales of $20,000. So that is impact, that is purpose results. You might not have that for everything, and that's okay. Don't worry if you have just brief statements for some other things, but those are the things that kind of stand out too in a resume. All right, so we really quickly touched on this earlier on, right? I said that our employers are using what we officially call applicant tracking systems, especially a lot of our large employers that probably get thousands and thousands of resumes. Your resume is probably not being seen by a human first, rather a software program. Oftentimes, the ATS is really looking for keywords. You pretty much pull those keywords from the job description. I've been saying it all along. Now, one thing I don't want to see, and I did see in someone's resume once, is at the bottom of their resume, they put keyword, like they put the word keywords, colon, and then they've just listed a whole bunch of words. Don't do that. Just embed it within your resume, right? They have to be within your statements, because at the end of the day, there is also going to be a human looking at it. So, just keep that in mind. So let's talk a little bit about tailoring your resume, because I talked a lot about that, right? And making things relevant, and how do you really do that? If you know the job title, you can definitely add that. That would probably be more applicable to your cover letter. Some students will add a quick objective in their resume, or I forgot what they call it, a summary. I don't recommend, again, this is all very subjective. I don't recommend putting that in there. If you're including a cover letter, that's your statement, that's your summary, right? There's no need to take up additional space in a resume if you're already doing that, and you have such limited space anyway. So keep that piece right there to the cover letter. The hard skills, of course, you want to make sure you have that skills section in there, but also not just list it. How did you utilize that skill? Include it in your statements. This is how I use Java or C++ and how I made an impact. And then we talked a lot about this, is cutting out irrelevant information to for the employers. Getting a second opinion, of course, and we do offer drop-in advising for our students. So if you are interested, you are welcome to come into our office so we can review your resume. But first, before you do that, please use VMock. How many of you are aware of VMock? Okay, several of you, but for those of you that aren't, and again, after this, all these slides are done, I'll go into our website so you guys can see where you can log into that. It's basically an AI tool, which is similar to the applicant tracking system, because it's pulling out key things from your resume and to make suggestions for you, and then make those updates, and then you can come into our drop-ins. Why? Our drop-ins are very brief. They're 15 minutes. And oftentimes, if you have grammatical issues, structure issues, that alone will take 15 minutes. And so just to make the best use of your time, otherwise you'll have to come in. In some cases, we get really, really long lines, and you may not be able to be seen. So we want to make sure, again, you're just making the best use of your time. And we do have a waitlist queue system that you can log into using our website, which again, I'll show you in a bit. Job Scan is a great tool. This one, VMock, is internal. Our USC actually has a subscription to it for our students to use, and you can sign in with your shibboleth. Job Scan is not, it's external. So there is a subscription fee, but they do give a few free scans. So if you can try to fly by with the free scans, go for that. And I'll touch a little bit on what that looks like so you could see. Job Scan is pretty cool, because basically you submit your resume, you submit a job description of something you're interested in, and it's going to tell you you are a 10% match, meaning you're not going to move on to an interview, or you're 90%. That means you're in good shape, right? So it's a really great tool, for our students to be able to use, because that in essence is kind of what an applicant tracking system does, right? So as I mentioned, I wanted to kind of really quickly show you what these tools look like. So this is VMock, and this is kind of telling you where you're doing well, your overall score. We tell students that a score above an 80% or higher is recommended. Now, don't be too stuck on the score, because sometimes students are like, I have a 65%, I've tried updating it, I can't get it higher. What's going on? And at the end of the day, VMOC is an online tool. It's just a software, like it's not going to catch everything. And that's why we're still here. Partly, we do more than resumes, but that's the reason why it's also important to get, eyes on it, right? So use it for first kind of glance at your resume, and then you could come in to see us. So this is job scan. So it's telling you here, this is 54%. This means I need to work on my resume, right? Because I have almost half chance that it's not going to make it through, right? And it tells you specifically some of the findings over on the right-hand side, recruiting findings, skills match. So it's probably pulling like some keywords from, the job description to whether or not you are matching it. And in this case, you only have 16, the student has 16 out of 32. I did use it once, the tool, and it was actually pretty helpful. So just more into detail here. Obviously the check marks, you're doing decent, but some of the X's, right? They want some improvement there. Some of the hard skills that it looks like at 2. Soft skills, like we talked about. All right, so moving beyond, VMOC and job scan, just a few quick tips, on this whole process, right? Like the internship and application process can be taxing on you, right? We understand. You all are students, you have, class schedules, personal lives, commitments at home, a lot, is asked of you all. However, one thing I would want to emphasize is that at the end of the day, you all are here, hopefully, to earn your degree, right? And in order to earn your degree, you're going to be doing the classwork. You're going to be doing the projects. You're going to be doing the reports, homework, tests, all these things, right? Until you get to that magical moment when when it's graduation day, right? So you're putting all this work and effort, and ultimately you're going to get your degree. The internship and job search is also that way. You have to put in the time and the effort to see the results that you want. I know that's hard to hear, given that you all have such, impacted schedules. But, I think planning ahead, doing your research like you're doing right now by coming to these sessions and learning is really going to help you. So really think about managing the expectations for yourself. You know your workload, you know what you can do, but you also know that this should be part of your process. I always tell students, make this your homework, at least weekly. If you really want it, then make it more. That means you might have to cut out on some things that, and I did this when I was in my master's program. I was like being asked, oh, we're gonna go on a camping trip. Oh, we have this party happening. I had to decline many fun invitations in order to get through that program, unfortunately. So you're gonna, and it's not to say every fun thing is declined, because you also need your mental sanity. You need that wellness, right? So you're gonna have to find your balance, and it's gonna be different for everyone. But really, again, going to expectations, applying to 2 jobs may not be the greatest technique, right? And I'm sure you guys are applying way more than 2, right? But also I hear sometimes students are like, and they're really stressed out coming in, I've applied for 100 jobs and I haven't heard back. And I'm like, well, are you submitting the same resume for every single job? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, there's your, so here's the thing. If you are not getting any interviews, there's something wrong with your application materials. If you're getting interviews, but you're not hearing back, got to work on the interview skills, right? So it just depends on kind of the feedback that you're getting, once you're applying, right? You really also have to have that strategy and plan in place. So my recommendation, I already said it, was make this part of your homework, but detail out to yourself, what does that mean? So it may mean that, weekly you're going to check Viterbi Career Gateway, our internship and job board. And that weekly, you're also going to take a look at the events that are coming up, right? We have our Career Internship Expo that's coming up at the end of, or actually early February, 6th, 7th, and 8th. The main career center is also doing a fair. So these are big signature events, right? But there's others too that are happening even outside of our office. So be aware, right, of all these things that are happening so that it could be part of your plan. And then how do you actually achieve these goals, right? You really have to try to be specific. And it's hard to do this because I've done the SMART goal thing too. And it's hard to stick to it sometimes when you get really busy. But have you guys heard of SMART goals? Yeah. So it's basically goals, taken to the next level. So a goal like I need an internship next summer is not really truly a goal. It would be a SMART goal to be a little bit more specific. So this example here, for example, in order to achieve getting an internship right that next summer, I will apply to 5 jobs by this Sunday. So you are quantifying, you're being very specific, measurable, right? The number of jobs and also time bound by Sunday. Add it to your agendas, whatever you're using, Google, scheduler or whatever else you're using to this is its own project in itself. And then I've had students that they have Excel sheets or Google sheets to manage also the connections that they end up making, or the interactions that they have with people. And then are you following up with these? And that's a whole nother workshop called networking. So look out for that one. Oop, that's weird. Must have done that. So yeah, that's a whole nother workshop. And I already mentioned mindfulness. Please make sure that you're taking care of yourself. There's so many great new resources too available for our students because we know this is a difficult time. It's always been hard for our students, but I think even post-COVID a little harder, right? A lot of just sometimes in some cases new responsibilities. And we actually have here in Viterbi a director of wellness now. USC has a lot of really great resources. I think there's something called the USC Mindfulness app. So if you haven't downloaded, make sure to download it. There's counseling services. There's so much at your disposal to get that support that you need, whether that's academically, whether that's, physically or mentally, there's a lot out there for you all and you're paying for it. These are part of your fees, right, that are coming out that you're paying for. So make sure you're taking advantage. All right, so a few action items for you, and maybe you've done a few of these, so then it's one less thing for you to do. But if you haven't already, 3 things. Upload your resume to VMOC, upload your resume and a job description. So that means you have to look for one that you're interested in, and maybe you already found one, so that's great. That shouldn't be too hard. And then you can upload those to JobScan to see, are you kind of, really tailoring your resume well, for your applications. And then draft the cover letter. The cover letter is probably the hardest one. I myself, sometimes I'm like, drafting those cover letters are tough. But once you have that master, it gets easier because then you're like, okay, I really did a great job with this. I had it looked at. So now when you edit it, it shouldn't take that long. All right. So I know I tried to get through that as quickly as I could, but probably didn't do the greatest job. Sorry, I moved something here and I'm moving it back. Okay, there we go. So now we have some time for questions. So again, for the people online, please do, ask any, questions, add them in the chat. And I'll kind of go back and forth between, the people that are here. Hello, everyone who is online. Please do feel free to add your questions in the chat, and I'll go back and forth between answering those for the in-person students and the online students. All right. All right. I will start with online first this time. Okay, so I have one question here from Elizabeth. On a resume, if you are getting both your bachelor's and master's at USC, should you list the master's degree first? Yes, Elizabeth, I would definitely list master's first and then list the expected graduation date, and then you can list your bachelor's right underneath. All right, other questions? In person. Yes.
When's a good time to start applying for
Great question. So the question is, when is a good time to start applying for internships? So I'm going to give you, I think I'll answer this question by talking about the recruitment cycle. So 70% of recruitment happens in the fall, and the remainder in the spring. So the concentration of it happens in September and October. So don't worry if you miss that period. There's still employers that are coming back, but just know that it is a big piece of when our employers are recruiting. Many of them do not come back. So if you have another year to work with, really make sure that you are active in the fall. If you didn't get a chance to, start to become very active right now. Do all the things that we talked about, right, to prepare. Right now, this presentation is really your first stage of the internship and job search process, which I like to call the research and preparation stage, right? You're preparing your documents, you're researching your resources, and that's that. Then the next part is the actual applications and the engaging in, you know, the events that are happening and such. So ideally, and also it's hard to have there's not a straight answer for that, but I did want to give like the recruitment cycle so you can understand the importance of doing some work in the fall. But every student is different because some students come in the spring. And so it might be different than for the students that have already been here a semester. Some students are international student. They have to wait, I believe, a year almost, right, before they can actually do an internship. So I can say for the most part, you know, fall is great, but if you're a spring admit, you've already missed that, right? And you're like, oh no, I'm worried now. No, don't worry, because you now have this opportunity this semester to start engaging with our employers, to start to network, to start, and you don't have that in the fall. I can imagine how many of you are fall admits. Oh my goodness, are you all spring? Really? Oh my goodness. Well, I guess it makes sense, right? For our fall admits, you know, many of them went through that process. Is anyone online, you know, fall admits? Okay, probably all spring. So here, okay, I'll talk then to the majority of the audience then. So I talked about this. Did I just have another? Oh, I had graduate career readiness week. Did you guys attend that? Anyone? So I kind of talked about it, right? And kind of what to do, you know, right now during the semester, because you have to wait, right, until technically the spring of 2024, right, is when you would be eligible to do an internship. And many of our students, just so you know, do fall or spring internships. So that's a possibility. But, you know, the question often is, well, should I even go to these events? Should I go to the career fair? And the answer is yes, but you have a different strategy. It's not like, okay, I need a job in the summer, because you can't, because you know, are not eligible. So the plan would then be to do your research. It would be to start making connections. And I'm not talking about connections here because this isn't the networking workshop. I could talk a whole nother hour about that. But that's going to be key to your internship and job search. This is just the beginning, right? The research here. So definitely just make sure to kind of keep that in mind as you go through the. I don't think I fully answered your question because there is no right time for every single person, right? Like for a fall admit, they technically have to wait till next, you know, a whole year. Actually, no, until they would be eligible for summer 2022. For you all, you would be eligible for spring 2024, like we talked about. So technically, you can still start looking for internships in the fall, though, because a lot of our employers do come for summer 2024. They'll be coming this fall for summer 2024. But they may also have opportunities for the spring. So that's probably when you would start really applying because it takes time, right? And our employers are looking ahead of time. And as we talked about, 70% happens in recruitment happens in the fall, 30% in the spring. Yeah, hold on. I'm going to see if there's any online questions. All right, so I have a question online. I took courses at multiple colleges. Should I include all of them or only the schools I got a degree from? Again, we go back to that important word I've been using this presentation. Can anyone tell me what that word would be? The relevant stuff? Yes, the relevant stuff. If you're going to add these courses from your other colleges, do they matter to this particular employer that you're applying to? If they do, then yes, of course, have a related courses section on there. This also applies to students that are switching majors. In that case, have a relevant coursework section so that you can include your new major and the new classes that you're taking. Other than that, though, if you're not switching majors, leave that off, because that's an important chunk of space that you're taking up in your resume. And for the most part, what I've heard from our employers is that they don't really care about those courses unless they're very unique, unless, again, you're switching majors, or they're asking for it. Some employers do ask, so just pay attention to their application instructions. All right, so now I'm going to turn over to someone in person.
Yeah, I have a question. If I spent a semester before here in the US as a student, would I be eligible in the summer?
Yeah, technically you have to go based off of when you started school in the US for that period of time as an international student.
So I have one semester, this one.
So you technically started in the fall?
No, I'm a spring admin, but when I was in college, I did a semester abroad. So would that?
But did you do your semester abroad last semester?
No, I did it in fall 2019.
Check with OIS. I'm not quite sure how that works, if there's a break in time,
Because
how that works.
I think they said that I would be eligible.
I'm not a CPT expert. I know about CPT. Our office manages our internship courses for credit, but I wouldn't know the answer to that. I'm sorry. That would be the Office of International Services. Traditionally, I would say yes, you're fine, because you count that towards your time, but that there's a break in time there, 2019 to now. I don't know how that works specifically, so that's why I would recommend asking them for that one specifically. Anyone else online have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions coming in from online, so I am going to turn over to in-person questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I started this semester, I'm an international student, as per what I've understood. So, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm eligible for internships in spring 2024 or summer of 2024.
That's what, yes.
Which of it, is it?
Well, technically, in my understanding, again, I believe it was 2 semesters that you have to be here, right? So your 2 semesters would be now, and then it would be fall of 2020, this year, 23. So technically, then you would be eligible next, some, like you said, spring 2024. But again, I am not the Office of International Services. That was my previous understanding of it. The rules and laws change all the time. So just go on their website real quick and check it. But that was my understanding as well. That would be the spring 2024 for me too. Yes. Yeah.
Where do you usually go to for jobs? Do you go to the company homepage or for the portal?
So I'm going to give you a quick answer there, because I have a whole nother workshop on that too, actually. One is called the Job and Internship Search, and we go into a lot of detail into, best places for that. We will talk about Viterbi Career Gateway, which I talked a little bit about now. If you're not already on there, please make sure to get on there. Please also use our website. We actually, a lot of the things that are available, for you, these questions that you have about resources, about when are your workshops happening, when are your events happening, just go to our website. We also have our Get Hired newsletter that hopefully you guys all got it yesterday. We send it out every Wednesday so that you are aware of what's happening. And I had a long list of things in there. So every week we try to keep you informed. The main career center has a newsletter that sends it out, and you might get something from your department. One thing that I will say too is make sure that you're aware, of what's happening, especially right now in the spring when we're a little lighter. Like, make sure you know who's coming to campus, and make sure to go to these things, engage. Which is part of that job and internship search process. But if you go to our website, let me see, do this real quick here. There's also what we call the Viterbi Career Toolkit. So immediately here, you'll see a link to Viterbi Career Gateway, which is that site that you want to use to find internships and jobs. But if you go also to the Job and Internship Toolkit, actually, I'll hit 2 birds with 1 stone here, because I talked about VMOC earlier. This is where you would go to find those templates for resumes and cover letters. And you can go through, here's VMOC, and then if you go down further, you got the samples in there. And then in terms of other resources, if you go back to that front page of the toolkit and you scroll down, there's a lot of resources also from the main USC Career Center that we've listed here as well. And a lot of these are also for our international students. This one in particular is one of our newer resources, which I've heard has been great, you know, as a resource for our international students. So there's a lot out there. Again, this is a prep and research stage for you all right now. All right, so I have time for probably one more question. Let's see, are one column resumes more preferred than 2 column? Oh, the columns. Again, this is subjective. I don't like the columns. I feel like you can't utilize the space wisely. Like it feels like it's less information. And as it is, right, we're trying to get more information in there. And I feel like using the column form, and I've discussed this actually with my colleagues. What do you guys think? And we did come to a conclusion that we did not like the column format. But again, at the end of the day, the resume is your document. You want to feel comfortable with it. And if you feel like you're getting, you know, hits from it, continue to use it, you know, definitely. All right. Well, we have come to that time. It's 1 o'clock. I'll answer one last question because I know like we went through a lot of information. If anyone else has any other questions. I want to give a chance to someone else. Yes.
Do we have add a picture to the resume or not? I have seen templates.
Good question. Do we add a picture on the resume? No, leave it off because it's personal, identifiable information. So don't put in that. Don't put in Social Security. So don't put in like F1 status. Like you don't have to put all these things in there because especially the employer doesn't want to see it. Because if they see your picture, it's kind of like, oh, they look a certain way. Maybe they're not like hiring or interviewing me because I look a certain way, you know? So less is more, don't include that. Try to keep your resume simple. Like don't go crazy with the colors. That's what we've heard too is, and then also please PDF your resume. I've gotten resumes that one of them, I was really kind of annoyed because I got JPGs, but it was like snapshots of different sections of the resume. So I had to click on 4 different pictures to see the full resume. I was done by picture 2. I'm like, and that, I don't know what happened in that application tool that they use. Maybe that's what it was, but it was kind of hard. So just PDFs are always really helpful. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming again. This takes some time to process on Zoom. So hopefully, if not tomorrow, hopefully early next week, this will be available. I'm going to stop the recording now so that we can get that hopefully processed soon.